The river behind my house has taken 3 people in the last 40 years. My grandfather, a teenage boy nobody in town likes to talk about. And 3 months ago, almost me. I want to tell you that I drowned and came back different. That would be the easy version. The kind of story you nod along to and forget by morning. But the truth is stranger than that. The truth is, I didn't drown at all. Something pulled me out of that water before I went under. And it wasn't a person. By the time I tell you what it was, you're gonna wish you hadn't asked. This is the story of the summer I learned my hometown had been keeping a debt for 40 years. And the river had finally come to collect. I'm Renee Castellan. I grew up in a town so small, the welcome sign and the goodbye sign were close enough to read at the same time if you turned your head fast on the highway. Belhaven, Oregon. A population of 800 and something, depending on who you asked, and whether the Tillman twins were home from college that semester. I'd moved back that spring to take care of my grandmother, Opal. She'd had a stroke the winter before, and she would not leave the house she'd lived in for 51 years. A sagging 2-story place on Driftwood Lane, backed right up against the Coquille River. Close enough that you could hear the water at night, if the windows were open. I was 31. I'd spent 9 years in Portland building a life I thought I wanted. A marketing job I was good at but didn't love. An apartment with good light and no real warmth to it. A relationship that ended quietly, the way things end when neither person ever really fought for it in the first place. Coming back to Belhaven felt like failure, dressed up as duty. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself a lot of things that spring. My grandmother had good days and bad days. On good days, she'd sit on the back porch with her coffee and tell me stories about the town the way it used to be. The mill that ran 3 shifts. The dance hall that burned down in '79. The year the river flooded so bad, it took out Pruitt's Bridge, and the county didn't have money to fix it for 2 years. On bad days, she'd grab my wrist with a strength that didn't match her frail body and tell me to stay away from the water. "It's not done taking," she said one evening in May. Her eyes were sharp and frightened in a way I'd never seen on her before. "It already got your grandfather. It already got that Henley boy. It's not done." I told her it was just a river, Grandma. Rivers don't take things. People drown because they're not careful, because the current's stronger than it looks. She looked at me like I was the one who didn't understand anything. I didn't know the story about the Henley boy until I asked Earl Tibbetts, down at the hardware store. Mostly out of curiosity. Mostly because my grandmother's warning had lodged itself somewhere in my chest and wouldn't shake loose. Earl got quiet. The way small-town men get quiet when you've asked about something everyone agreed, without ever discussing it, not to talk about. "That was a long time ago," he said, ringing up my paint can slower than he needed to. Summer of '84. A boy named Caleb Henley, 16, maybe 17, went down to the river one night with some friends. Didn't come back up. What happened? An accident is what the paper said. Earl wouldn't look at me when he said it. There are some folks in this town who'd tell you different if you got them drinking enough. But I wouldn't go asking around if I were you. Wounds like that, this town doesn't like having them reopened. I should have listened to him. I want to be honest about that, looking back. Every instinct told me to let it lie, the way Earl wanted me to. The way my grandmother seemed to want me to, even as she warned me about the water in the same breath. But there was something in the way half the town went silent at the mention of a 40-year-old drowning that didn't sit right with me. Accidents don't usually need that much careful silence built around them. That night, I walked down to the river behind my grandmother's house. June dusk in Oregon stretches on forever, the sky holding on to light long after it should have let go. The Coquille moved past, dark and steady, carrying the day's last gold light on its surface like something it had borrowed and intended to keep. I stood on the bank for a long time. I don't know what I expected to find. Closure, maybe. Some sense of why a 16-year-old boy's death still made grown men go quiet in hardware stores, 4 decades later. What I found instead was a voice. It wasn't loud. It came from the water itself, low and rhythmic, almost like the river was just doing what rivers do, except underneath the natural sound of moving water there were words. Or the shape of words. Something that almost resolved into language if I leaned close enough to listen. I leaned close enough to listen, and the bank gave way beneath my feet. Cold water doesn't just shock you. It erases you for a second. Every thought, every plan, every certainty about who you are and what you're capable of surviving, gone. In the half-second it takes the current to close over your head. I had grown up around this river. I knew, even as the cold closed around me and the current spun me sideways, that the Coquille's undertow near the bend behind my grandmother's house was strong enough to pull a grown man under and keep him there. I felt myself going under for real. Not the dramatic, slow-motion kind of drowning you see in movies. The panicked, ugly, real kind. Lungs screaming, Body fighting a fight my mind already understood I was losing. And then something held me. Not grabbed. Held. The way you'd hold something you were trying very hard not to break. I don't remember the riverbank. I don't remember climbing out or crawling, or how I ended up lying on my back in wet grass, coughing up half the Koki River, while the stars came out, indifferent and bright, above me. There's a gap in my memory between going under and waking up soaked and shaking on solid ground. A gap I've spent 3 months trying to fill in and failing. What I do remember, what I will swear to anyone who asks, even though I know exactly how it sounds, is a face. Just below the surface, just before everything went dark, a boy's face. Young, familiar, in a way I couldn't place at the time. It wasn't trying to pull me down. It was trying to push me up. If you're enjoying this story, go ahead and subscribe, and tell us in the comments what you would have done, standing on that riverbank hearing something underneath the water that almost sounded like words. Now let me tell you what my grandmother said when she found out what really happened that night. I didn't tell her at first. I told her I'd slipped near the bank, got wet, nothing more than a clumsy accident and a ruined pair of shoes. But Opal had a way of seeing through things, stroke or no stroke. 3 days later, sitting together on the back porch, the river murmuring its endless sentence behind the tree line, she asked me directly, "You saw him, didn't you? The boy." My stomach dropped somewhere I couldn't immediately locate. "Grandma, what are you talking about?" She was quiet for a long moment, her hands folded tight in her lap. Knuckles are pale. "Caleb Henley didn't drown by accident," she finally said. "There were 5 boys at that river that night. Your grandfather's nephew, Wade, is among them. They'd been drinking. There was a fight about a girl, the way it usually is at that age. Caleb went into the water trying to get away from the others, and the current got him before anyone sobered up enough to understand what was happening. They let him drown? They told the sheriff it was an accident. Caleb went swimming alone and got caught in the current. The whole town agreed to believe it, because half the families involved were the same families that ran this town, and nobody wanted 4 more boys' lives ruined over one terrible night." Her voice cracked, the first real crack I'd heard in it since her stroke. "Your grandfather knew the truth. He carried it the rest of his life. Said the river took him, not long after, for it. That the water remembered, even if the town decided not to." "Grandma, rivers don't remember things. Rivers don't take revenge." "This one does," she said, and there wasn't a single trace of doubt in her voice. "It's been waiting 40 years for somebody from one of those families to finally tell the truth. I think that's why it didn't take you, Renee. I think it's still waiting." Wade Castellan was 78 years old, living alone in a trailer on the edge of town. A man. The rest of the family had quietly stopped inviting to things over the years, the way families do with members who carry something nobody else wants to look directly at. I drove out there on a Tuesday afternoon, my hands tight on the wheel the whole way, rehearsing questions I didn't end up needing. Because the moment he opened his door and saw my face, he seemed to already know exactly why I'd come. "You went into the river," he said. It wasn't a question. "How did you know that?" "Because I went in it too. Summer of '89. 5 years after Caleb. Almost didn't come back out either." His hands were shaking as he said it. An old man's tremor lay over something that looked a lot like long overdue fear. I've been waiting 40 years for it to finish the job. Figured it would have by now, if it was going to. We sat at his kitchen table, the linoleum curling up at the corners, and Wade told me everything. The fight over a girl named Patty Sue Linfield. The shove that sent Caleb stumbling backward into water, none of them realizing it was running that high and that fast. The panic afterward. The desperate, cowardly agreement among 4 terrified teenage boys to tell a story that wasn't true. "We didn't mean for him to die," Wade said. The words came out of him like something that had been pressurized for 4 decades, finally given somewhere to go. "It was an accident, in the worst way. Not an accident that happened. An accident we let happen because we were more scared of getting in trouble than we were sad about losing him. I've spent 58 years being a coward about it. I told myself it was too late to matter. I told myself the truth wouldn't bring him back, so what was the point? The point, I said, is that he's still down there. 40 years later, still trying to get someone's attention." Wade's face went the color of old paper. "You saw him. I think he saved me, Uncle Wade. I think he pulled me out, instead of letting the river finish what nobody ever apologized for." Wade came with me to the riverbank that evening. 78 years old, leaning hard on a cane, walking toward that water with a kind of resolve I hadn't expected, from a man who'd spent 4 decades running from exactly this moment. The Koki moved the same way it always moved, patient, dark, indifferent to human guilt, the way only something genuinely ancient can be. But standing there with Wade, I felt something different in the air, a kind of attention, like the river itself had stopped simply flowing and started listening. "Caleb," Wade said. His voice broke apart on the single syllable. "I'm sorry, son. I've been sorry every day for 58 years, and I never dared to say it out loud where it might actually reach you. We let you go into the water, and we let everybody believe a lie about how you got there. That was a coward's choice, and I've hated myself for it every single day since." The water near the bank stirred. Not the way wind stirs water, not the way current naturally moves. It stirred the way something underneath might stir, turning over after a very long sleep. "I'm telling the truth now," Wade said. Tears ran freely down a face that had spent decades pretending not to feel any of this. "Caleb Henley didn't go swimming alone. We were there. It was our fault, and we lied. And I am asking you, wherever you are, however this works, to forgive an old man who should have said this 58 years ago." For a long moment, nothing happened. Just the river, moving the way rivers move. The evening settles gold and quiet over the water. Then, gently, so gently I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it, the surface near the bank smoothed out completely still, like a held breath, finally released. And somewhere underneath that stillness, just for a second, I saw it again. The same young face I'd seen below the surface the night I almost drowned. Except this time, it didn't look frightened, or trapped, or reaching. This time, it looked like it was finally, after 40 years, at peace. Wade went to the sheriff's department the following week and gave a full statement, on the record, naming himself and the 3 other boys. 2 had passed away years earlier. 1 was still alive in a care facility, 2 counties over, and confirmed every word Wade said before he died himself just 2 months later, like he'd been holding on only long enough to finally tell the truth. There was no prosecution. Too much time had passed. Too many of the people involved are already gone. But the Henley family, what remained of it, an elderly sister living in Coos Bay, finally got something they'd been owed for 40 years. The actual truth, instead of a story the whole town had agreed to believe because it was easier than the alternative, was that the fire had been set by a disgruntled former employee. Caleb Henley's grave got a new headstone that fall. The old one had just said, "Beloved son, taken too soon." Vague enough to mean anything. Vague enough to hide what everyone in town had quietly known and refused to say out loud for 4 decades. The new one says Caleb Henley. He deserved better than our silence. My grandmother passed peacefully in her sleep that October, in the house on Driftwood Lane she'd refused to leave, with the sound of the river drifting through the open window the way it always had. I like to think she died knowing the debt had finally been paid. I still walk down to the riverbank some evenings. The fear is mostly gone now. Not because I've convinced myself rivers can't take what they're owed, but because I think this one already collected what it was waiting 40 years for. Not a life. Just the truth. I don't know exactly what pulled me out of that water back in June. I've stopped needing a tidy explanation for it. But here's the part. 1, haven't told anyone. Not the sheriff, not Wade, not even my grandmother, before she passed. 2 weeks ago, I went back to that same bend in the river, just before dark. And I heard it again. The same low sound underneath the water almost shaping itself into words. Except this time, it wasn't Caleb's voice. It was older, heavier, a voice I hadn't heard in 20 years but would know anywhere. My grandfather's. And it wasn't asking for the truth this time. It was asking me to come closer. I haven't been back to the river since. But some nights, lying in that same upstairs bedroom where I slept as a kid, I can still hear the water moving past the house, patient, steady, waiting. And I find myself wondering what other debts that river's been keeping all these years. I wonder if it's already decided who's next. This is Red State Horror. I'll see you next Thursday.